दिल्ली में बंदरों का आतंक इतना हो गया है कि उपराष्ट्रपति भी इससे परेशान है। हालांकि दिल्ली नगर पालिका परिषद नई नई योजनाओं को लाकर बंदरों को पकड़ने के प्रयास में जुटी हुई है, लेकिन वो बहुत ज्यादा।
राजधानी में बढ़ते बंदरों का आतंक संसद की गलियारों में भी गूंजा। प्रशासन की ओर से की जाने वाली कोशिशें लगातार जाया होती जा रही है।
एक तो भगाने की टीम होगी और दूसरा पकड़ने की टीम होगी।
निकालते हम बंदर, लंगूर, आदमी।
काम करते हो कि बैंक के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट हो?
सरकारी नौकरी है, बंदर भगाता है।
भगा रहे हैं, नहीं भाग रहा।
तो भगाइए ना जी।
हाँ भगा रहे हैं, बंदर है।
कुछ कर ले नहीं तो भीख मांगे सड़कों पे भीख।
नहीं करना ही नौकरी।
ईब आले ऊ हम कर रहे हैं। जब भी आवाज निकालते हैं, हाथ हिलाते हैं तो एकदम पीछे एकदम फोर्स एकदम मुंह बांध के आता है।
अरे तो लीडर बन जाना है इन सबका। इन्हीं की तरह सोचने की तरह खाने की तरह है।
हमने वेपन्स के लाइसेंस ले लिए। ठीक है, गन्स के लाइसेंस ले लिए।
Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to everyone to the 7th edition of the Urban Lens Film Festival. As some of you and most of you might be aware, this year we've gone online due to COVID-19, but we believe it's also a good opportunity because it allows different viewers from different parts of the world to view films and join the discussion. So thank you so much for joining this session. Today the film that we are discussing is Ape Aleu. We hope you've had a chance to watch the film. If not, the film is still available for viewing on our website till 12 in the afternoon tomorrow, IST, and 6:30 a.m. GMT. A little bit about the film. Before I introduce the director, Prateek Vats, who is with us, and Bigyna Dahal, who is a sound designer. They'll be in conversation with Surabhi Sharma. Anjani, a young migrant, battles hordes of monkeys as a contractual monkey repeller, a newly created government job to tackle the monkey menace in the heart of Delhi. His job profile entails mimicking aggressive langurs, the original and extremely effective employees for the task. The sacred pests shred Anjani's dignity and courage in quick succession and make such a mockery of his professional ineptitude that an early discharge seems imminent. But when admonished by his pregnant sister, Anjani grits his teeth and decides to counter monkey business with monkey business of his own. The narrative of the film is shaped by extensive use of non-fiction elements incorporating non-professional actors alongside trained actors. Video footage is mixed with crafted mise-en-scène to weave a revealing account seeped in reality, which is as stark as it is observed. The Prateek Vats, the director, is an independent filmmaker based in Mumbai, a graduate of the film direction course from Film and Television Institute of India. He has directed both fiction as well as non-fiction films which have been showcased at various film festivals and non-formal spaces. His debut feature documentary, A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings, was awarded the special jury at the 65th National Film Awards. Ib Aleu is his first fiction feature-length film. The sound designer of the film, Bigyna Dahal, is an alumni of FTI, the prestigious film school of India, where he did his specialization in sound recording and sound design. While in film school, 3 of his student films were awarded the National Award in the Best Short Film category. After finishing his studies, Bigyna moved to Mumbai and has been working on various projects across genres, which includes feature films, advertisements, documentaries, short films, corporate videos, promos, etc. He is associated with films like Ralang Road, Shahid, Mantra, Peddlers Unreleased, and Asha Jawar Maje, Labor of Love, which won the National Award for Best Sound Design in 2015, to name a few. He also holds a degree in physics with photography from Ferguson College, Pune. He is extremely passionate about music, and like many others who come from his state, Sikkim, he is also a music enthusiast himself. He loves to travel and explore places and people. During most of his travels, he spends time recording sounds native to each place and to understand and explore the various soundscapes each place has to offer. Our conversationalist, Surabhi Sharma, she studied film direction at the Film and Television Institute of India, Pune, and made her first film in 2001. She has worked on several feature-length documentaries apart from some short fiction films and video installations. Her key concern has been documenting cities in transition through the lens of labor, music and migration, and most recently, reproductive labor. Cinema, verite, and ethnography are the genres that inform her filmmaking. Thank you so much for being in this conversation. Surabhi, I now hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Urban Lens Film Festival, for inviting me to be in conversation with a film that I'm particularly fond of. And greetings, Prateek and Bigyna, both of whom I have followed their work recently quite avidly and with a lot of admiration. So wonderful to be in conversation with both of you. I think I'd like to begin actually, Prateek and Bigyna, by thinking about your film in a somewhat new light, given what we have seen happening and unfold in our country in the past 7-8 months. I'm quite closely familiar with your film, having seen it multiple times, you know, when it was released and even while you were making it. But actually it's a kind of film that I kept going back to as we saw the impact of the lockdown and the way the narrative unfolded all around us in the country. And you know, your film underscored before this pandemic the presence of the faceless, the invisible migrant worker. And suddenly, so here was a film that was trying to give face and body and emotion to this figure that was absent definitely in our policy, but also in our imagination. And suddenly during the lockdown, we saw a churn where people whose labor was the only thing that mattered to our cities was suddenly in our face. And we had to, as a nation, confront the fact that we have systematically really only extracted labor without giving a shred of dignity or humanity to the person who provides that labor to the city. And your film, in a sense, really underlines that very dark underbelly of our cities by showing us in very dramatic, and as you said, as your synopsis say, in almost absurd levels of how dignity is taken away. Every character in your film, in a sense, is in that shadow world. A shadow world that's on the fringes of the city. Their work is on the fringes. Their work is not officially recognized. And yet their work is central and part of the seat or the heart of the country and Delhi, which is North Block. So you have this strange kind of, dichotomy that you place before us. The person from the edge, absolutely essential to the very working of our democracy and our nation. But at the same time, the most extreme example of that indignity is your protagonist, Anjani, who is reduced absolutely in realistic terms to the category of somebody who has to counter monkeys. So there's a lot of imagery, there's a lot of ideas embedded in this very quote unquote normal realistic story, but there's nothing about it that is normal or it's real, but it's not normal. Let me use the words that way. So you've actually opened up a canvas that has suddenly become the most critical thing for us to think about. So I thought, in this conversation, what I'd like to do is open up the process a little bit of how you made a lot of formal decisions to really reflect on the kind of ideas that you were dealing with. So, I have over time always told you that, why do you keep calling this film a satire? Because it is almost like it is social realism at its best. The fact that it is an absurd situation doesn't take away from the fact that it is real, and it is not magic realism. It is not, it is not a satire, because it is real. So what did these categories really mean to you, Prateek, when you first encountered the story idea and when you first encountered a draft of the script by your scriptwriter? And how did you then get involved with the script writing, and how did you take that idea forward?
Hi, thanks. So as far as the first part of the thing goes, is I'll try and answer in terms of satire, social realism, or whatever categories the film has been put in. It's been shown as comedy, many kind of drama. So actually that, I don't know how to answer that myself, because the whole idea, the seed was a newspaper article, a profile on Mahinder, which I'd read many years back. But the more me and Shubham, the writer, got into this, the more we realized there's something beyond reality here. There's too much reality of the North Block, of the monkeys, of contractual labor, but there's also this, I don't know, specific or a reality which could be carved out of there, which to me was representative of what was happening or how the country was being run or is being run. Where the dignity and human grace from labor is systematically being removed. It's not accidental. It's very much a design. And by design I mean there's a whole institutional mechanism that facilitates this. They're it goes up till the judiciary actually. Courts are dealing with these matters of monkeys in Delhi, and then there's the governments involved, and then there are contractors, and then there are subcontractors. And so there's a whole mechanism. It's not by accident that somebody decided to do this job one day. So the more we got into this, the more we realized that reality is obviously the fact that it's real is giving us this springboard almost to go into a really, because then if it just remained real, I think it would never cut through like it is, because we wanted that absurdity to sort of personify that absurdity, quantify that absurdity of this can go till that level. you know and to us it became this whole idea of real and normal, like you said. Like, how do we keep a universe which is very real but not familiar, or which seems very familiar but not real? Those kind of aspects, Shubham in his writing woven very beautifully in the kind of scenes he was putting out, in the kinds of situations he was putting out. And that was very helpful in terms of just deciding how to frame this whole story, how to look at this job, how to look at the fact that this is happening at the nerve center of where the Indian democracy is running from. And of course the whole idea of religion, the whole idea of how, what nation is, and how nation and religion is used interchangeably these days. So those kind of questions were already there in our universe, but we wanted to have a script which was reflective of one thing for us, which is how to make sense of what is going on around us. you know we still talk about the same thing, that we cannot make sense of what is happening. We cannot make sense of the fact that parliament people can stand up and say we do not have data on how many people died while walking back to their homes when the pandemic uh, you
Lockdown.
know yeah, when this senseless kind of ill thought out lockdown happens, you force people to walk back, and then you say we don't know how many people died, we don't really care, and so no compensation can be given, obviously. So this idea of what you say, they are useful as long as they provide their labor. Outside of the working shift, we don't really care of where they sleep, what do they eat, whether do they live or not. So these kind of questions were coming again and again. But again, we were very conscious of what should be the plot, you know, of a fiction script here. Because we'll be dealing with so much reality in the formal decisions that we were taking of how to shoot it, how to Bigya will talk more about sound, is what is the design of this reality that became very important for us overall.
So, the question is then how do you, when you are at the bottom line, and I'll be asking Bigyna to speak on this a little more in a while, but when you locate your fictional character in a believable setting, and locate that person in a more than real space, which is a North Block, which is the epicenter of Delhi, which is where the parliament is. And you have another layer. So this is, of course, the architecture, which is static. But then you have another layer of this variable, which is the monkey, which is there, but it's unpredictable. It's both a pest and it's God, but equally for you as filmmakers and for the sound recorders, this is a moving target. It's a moving subject that you have absolutely no control over, right? So when you sort of bring these two elements together, in terms of how do you even begin constructing your sequences? How do you, because you can only script it up to a point. So at what point do you allow for the story to run away from you while you're shooting? And, Prateek, if you could respond to it, and then Bigyna, if you could pick that up to really talk about, and I don't mean the technical problem, but even conceptually, what does that even mean, right? So, Prateek, if you could like to begin.
Yeah, starting from the architectural point bit, it's like growing up in Delhi, I've always found that area very fascinating because it's like it's built like a fort. And historically also post 1857, the Britishers built it as a counterpoint to the Red Fort and chose Raisina Hill, which is at a higher altitude than the Red Fort was. And, those kind of things were happening there. And it's such an imposing structure. You go there, and before this thing, there's only one time I had gone inside that structure, was some 5 years back to do a meeting with some minister. And the first thing that struck me was when we came out of that meeting, it was a disaster, was like, somebody who sits inside this building, how will they ever know what is going around in the country? Because in that area, that 2 square kilometers, it is that Republic of India, and beyond that, India starts. It's perfect. It's nice skyline, beautiful flowers, nice red sandstone buildings. It is just the perfect country. I think it looks much grander than something in France or whatever. But just beyond that, it's total chaos. And that was the starting point of how do we frame this structure. And then it is it is covered by security and all the army, BSF, CISF, and all the Fs and all the military, paramilitary, whatever you can think of. But you realize that they are there for the people and not for the monkeys, and monkeys is something they can't handle because they can't shoot them, you can't hit them because it's a religious creature, and they are really terrified of them. Terrified in the sense it's absolute nuisance because one monkey will enter one building and something or the other will keep happening. So it's a very touchy topic for all the security people deployed in that area. So that was the whole idea. And when we went in, we realized that the topic of monkeys was such a disarming topic. Like everybody was so hostile when we went in with a camera or when we would just be asking around questions. But the moment we mentioned monkeys, they would just start saying, हाँ यार बहुत problem है, आप इस time पे आओ, देखो आपको पता चलेगा हम क्या करें. And suddenly conversations would start happening, and suddenly all these security people would become human beings with real problems, with real concerns, with less of their macho-ness, all their masculinity associated with their automatic weapons would just wither away at the mention of monkeys. And it just seemed like a beautiful kind of conversation starter for personally for me. And we would keep questioning me and Shubham of how do we incorporate this area into the film, because there are logistical problems with shooting of monkeys and the distance and what kind of equipment we can use in these areas and things like that. But we realized very soon that it was a script which would really flower if we let it be and not try and impose ourselves over the script as such, over the film as such. To Shubham's credit, the script beautifully lent itself to the fact that which could grow beyond the written text. While filming, it could become more rather than become less. So generally, मतलब we like to joke that हमारी scripts जो है फिल्मों को जकड़ देती है ना. Like our scripts tend to stifle our films. Here, I had a script with me which was encouraging the film to grow beyond itself without really going into this random thing of shoot whatever and we'll see it in the edit. All the time there was this idea of, okay, we knew where the story should move. So you have a complete script, you have some sequences with monkeys, that's not going to happen. But what is the essence of that sequence? Is Anjani frustrated? Is Anjani in control? Is Anjani scared of the monkey? So those kind of sequences, then we would try and preempt and shoot over days and see if, as far as the emotional graph was happening, the psychological graph of the characters were happening, we were okay with it, as long as it was in sync with the larger plot of the film and the movement of the characters overall and the drama. But again, this did mean that technically we had to be very sure of how this would happen, because again, there was a reality and there was a meaning which we were trying to create or evoke. But the question of craft crept in every day, every time we were shooting, of how do we do this? Okay, everything is good in theory and on script and everything. But this question then again and again, technically, how do we do it? And at what point do we say, okay, I'll step back as a director or, whatever, and let it happen? Or, intervene very proactively and say, no, this cannot go like this, because then the duration of the scenes would go for a toss, overall duration of the film would go for a toss. It couldn't have been okay, it's that kind of a meandering script of, we'll see what to shoot tomorrow or depending on what we've shot today. The story had to move in a very sort of structured manner, and that was the fun aspect, and this whole anxiety of controlling a fiction shoot wasn't there, which was the most wonderful part. It created certain kind of again anxiety, but this whole idea of not being in control wasn't such a bad thing at all. It was helping us because we were talking constantly amongst the crew. It was a very small, intimate crew, and we were bouncing off ideas of each other of where this will go. And I think that's what Shubham wasn't sure that whether these guys can pull it off. So he started involving himself in every aspect of the filming process and even the post-production. Because it again, because he would say, "Arey, ye to likha hai na, karna kya hai?" So that clarity was there, that we don't have to translate this, we have to interpret what we've written in terms of what reality is offering us.
Right, right. So this might be a good point to actually draw in Bigyna into the conversation. And even if we allow ourselves to leave North Block a little bit, Bigyna, you know, there's the film is sort of really divided up very clearly into, as I said, the edges of the city, which is where the protagonists live, which is like even visually completely like a polar opposite of the North Block. And then there are these sequences of the traveling in between, the in between spaces, whether it's the metro or it is the railway track, you know, all these other places. So in terms of, for you as being a core part of this very small crew, how are you interpreting each of these spaces? And how are you, in a sense, taking, so, you know, we'll talk about the sound design a little later, because I'm really a very, very, very big fan of the sound design. A lot of the sequences that I saw in the rough cut, I wasn't convinced about, but when I saw your sound design, I shut up completely. But we'll come to the sound design a little later. But first, I really wanted to ask you, how did you, in a sense, conceptualize how you would go about understanding these spaces and responding to this?
See, basically, like how Prateek said, there was no binding factor of like that kind of the location. I mean, we had locations like that, but there was no binding factor which would say I need to do this every day. There was nothing like which would say I need to go and record this today, or I need to do something like this today. So every day was like an exploration by itself. I mean, we knew halfway of what we are shooting, the whole fictional part of what we're going to do and what needs to be done, the sort of locations that we would prepare ourselves that kind of a location, and then Prateek and I would sit and talk about what could it be, and sometimes things would be completely different than what you would imagine it to be. It's like one of the days when I wasn't so prepared. It was like the second day we had this whole Hanuman this was Shivratri procession going on. I didn't have like the whole thing that I was like I normally supposed to be going on a shoot. And then that day I managed, like, because I always carry like smaller recorders here and there and all that. I'd give one record, like those kind of things used to. So more or less it was exploration for me also, like in that sense that like all the locations were like that only, like like Delhi is as varied any other Indian city, even Mumbai is so varied, like people from so many like the whole of countries will be in Delhi, and there is this obviously the class divide, everything everywhere, and then the main area that we were shooting was totally different from the house, the railway tracks, everything. It was all so bizarre. So it was an exploration for me as well. Like every day was a new day. I just knew I just had equipments. I just had things that I could sort of gather all the sounds that I would possibly think would be needed later, and then I would do all of that. But everything was just total exploration, like how we would like go for a documentary shoot in a way.
Yeah. All the spaces is one thing, but I cannot even imagine what it was that you were hoping to get when in the Republic Day parade, for example. You know, we all know the Republic Day parade like the back of our hands, but then when you go there to shoot or record, I cannot even begin to imagine what is it that I will begin with, right?
No,
So
it's complete chaos. I mean, just the way we have imagined Republic Day all the time it's just one narration going on, and then maybe like one, too few parades and certain things happening. But the reality, the ground reality, like how Prateek wants to put it, like looking like from the ground level, not from the cameras set up the way the Doordarshan would show us. It is totally a different world.
So again, like I want to come back to the core of the film actually, which is the monkeys. As I said, you have a character saying the monkeys have taken over over the North Block. So they're both, as I said, the pest, and they are someone to be revered. They are God, and in a sense, you are parallel to your main protagonist. There is a way in which the film lens keeps shifting the way we are experiencing and seeing the monkeys, even the number of monkeys. It's sort of, and the monkeys from being a very real pest all over the place starts becoming more and more of an idea. So, that journey was incredible. But I have to say that to date, even after I don't know how many viewings of the film, I'm still a bit flummoxed by when Anjani becomes the monkey and the langur. So he becomes the monkey to frighten the brown, the simians they're called, right?
Macaques.
Yeah. So he becomes the langur to frighten those, but that langur and the langur that he becomes in the end, not the langur, but the red-faced monkey is another idea. There's a leap over there. And while I know emotionally what my response is in the end, how deeply both disturbing and poignant it is, but I still am trying to unravel what happened. What does it mean? What has Anjani transformed into? And, as I don't want you to fix the meaning in one way or the other, but as I know that this was actually a sequence you shot on the second day of the shoot, and it was totally, in a sense, unplanned. But at your editing table and when you were doing the sound design, where did you think your film had reached, and what was that last sequence all about?
See, like if you ask me and Shubham, no, we never agree that anything was unplanned in this shoot. We are very convinced that everything was planned and everything was preempted. See, the fact is, these two sequences, when he becomes the langur, for us, it was also a liberation. Like, this is the only time in the whole film where we see our protagonist liberated. It's just an expression of himself, a sort of how do I say, free flowing kind of expression of him, and him just having fun, dancing around, whatever. While in the last sequence, we were always trying to, again, carving out reality of where can we shoot, which sort of puts the film at the end, where we say, okay, the world around him is going mad. When we were writing, most of our endings were becoming as Anjani going mad. And we weren't very convinced with that. We wrote a couple of multiple kind of endings, and they were nice in the sense of nicely in terms of sequencing. But somehow, while discussing with another friend, Vikrant, and we said, how do we find an ending where we see, okay, this madness is around him.
Yeah.
So Anjali is not the only one going mad here. It's the whole world which has gone mad. And in that madness, he seems comfortable. He fits right in. To have an ending like that was, how we say of what makes a mob. How is a mob created? Who is the person? Who are these young people who go in a mob and, kill somebody, or vandalize something, or burn down a theater, or tear down a painting, or beat somebody up? How is this mob created is something I am very interested in and concerned about. Of we wanted to end the film at a place where this sort of an endearing character since the beginning, not a very not the best kind of well-behaved guy or very talented, but still harmless kind of a person. And towards the end, we leave with a frame where he's become so unpredictable that we do not know or what he will do next. And that is that unnerving feeling that we wanted to end the film with, because that is the feeling me and Shubham are engaging with most of the times these days. It's about this, having this idea of this is very unnerving of what is happening around us. And to me, that sequence is this, was that, and this unnerving madness is religious in nature. It is jingo nationalistic in nature, and it's got this, lumpent religiosity about it. It's got a certain kind of anarchy about it, and chaos about it. So
And menace.
and this kind of procession sort of gave us that opportunity of, okay, here is something where we can build a sequence on, with the noise of the thing and the floats and the langurs and the Bharat Mata. It was given to us. It's like, Republic Day, you have a langur float, and in the last religious procession, you have Bharat Mata and the langur. So it sort of came together for us. But again, we will never agree that it was unplanned.
Your cinematographer insists it happened. But yes,
Yeah, I know.
Intention to have. I'm waiting. I'm hoping that the audience come up with questions. I can, of course, continue, but please do send in your questions. But in the meantime, I actually wanted to. So please, I'm waiting for your questions. I will read them out. But as you type them in, Bigyna, if you can speak a little to the sound design, because I mean there are lots of things in the sound design really to think about and to mull over. But your in fact, one of the questions that I had for Prateek in the early on, which I left behind, if at all there is one thing that takes this kind of very real social realist kind of imagination into a surreal magic realist kind of zone, it's the sound design, and your use of this electronica kind of textures in a sense just takes you out of believing that this is real, or is this a hallucination. Oh, what was that?
Sorry. Okay, so that's
so this was my question while we are waiting for more questions. Really, can you speak to the sound design?
See, sound design in a way was being very, very real and also not being very real. It was that thin line. I don't know how. I really like, personally, I really like manipulating real sounds all the time. Even my earlier films, everything, I mean, it just feels very real, but then there's always like a lot of, sometimes there's some electronic manipulation with a few things, sometimes using, like in Prateek's film, especially with Prateek, using music is so we tend to, we don't use music too much, and then we tend to use sound only to sort of create that whole rhythmic musical, I mean, when that something starts.
Oh. Bigna's.
Bigya.
Oh. I guess he's joining back. Okay, while we're waiting, Prateek, would you like to sort of speak about your...
Yeah, sort of taking on what Bigya was saying, that why, what we were trying to do, and what Bigya is like, really, it's fun to work with Bigya in that way of how he uses these real sounds but creates such rhythms out of these, so that they cease to remain just real. They go into a psychological landscape of the characters. So it sort of really helps in smoothing out the edit, just giving a arc to the movement of all characters. It's like, for example, if I have to talk about one thing, it's where this guy, the brother-in-law, comes back with the gun. So it's a long sequence, and it travels from the amusement park, from the rail track to the basti, and finally inside the house. So in the edit, it was always, it felt like lamba hai kya, what can we do? do we pack this with most kind of sounds and cacophony and go into a real busty space and train and all that? But the way finally he designed it with the train with and all real sounds. I'm not saying that he wanted to put in something else. It's just those rhythms which were really they were creating movements, uh, and they were, they were adding such gravity to the shots and the movement of the character, and till the point he's really shaken and drinking water. It somehow, without that sound design, that sequence would never be the same. And if we had just used the real sounds, again it would have been not the same. And if it put music, it would have just died, I
Yeah.
feel. So
Overwritten the feeling. Yeah.
absolutely. So with Bigya, it's always like he was saying, manipulating these real sounds, but I think it's more to do with creating rhythms within these sounds. So even once the monkey bit is out of the film, and it's about him looking for jobs and or using an azan, or sort of using an electronic sound of the langur, it just seems so, uh, the rhythm of those sounds seems so correct and so unique while being very real. This is, I found it rare in sound designs, even for documentaries or fiction or short film or whatever. But I feel like Bigger, he says, exploration for him, it seems he's, even while designing, he's exploring only. And he'll try out a few things, and sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't work. But there's never a dull day. It's always, something, okay, aisa kare kya, ye kar sakte hain, and then it gets done when it gets done. So that's the tricky part. It's difficult to preempt ki how will this sound, because he will say no, once we get to the mixing stage, then you'll realize what I'm trying to say or trying to do, because it's not sounding right, it's not whatever. Even when music has to be put, especially we were using didgeridoo, which is not a very, uh, is not an instrument we hear too much in films,
Yeah.
and especially these kind of films, because generally there's this tendency to move towards earthy instruments and connect it with social realistic, and ये इसका background क्या है, characters का, where they're coming from, so we should use those instruments. So we never got into those kind of discussions actually. It again, it became an extension of what should be the sound of this music.
Right.
And Dij sort of started complementing it, and even the last track. So how do you mix our sounds into this? And so those kind of decisions is something that Bigya would really insist upon. And over time, a lot of it just, I just saw it coming together, and it was a great experience for me personally, sitting behind and just watching this happen in front of me every day.
Yeah, it's a kind of a rewriting in a sense, or an overwriting of what you had.
Yeah.
There are a lot of questions now, so I'm going to start. So one of the first questions, which is really fun question is really about your relationship with the monkeys. Were they a nuisance for you too? Having to work with them as your protagonists, one set of protagonists.
I was still, it was Shubham's relationship with the monkeys was beautiful.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, I would still, because I'll be with framing and ye kaise karna hai, he would get frustrated like he would be with an actor. Ki yaar ye aa nahi rahe hain, he's supposed to come here, why isn't he hitting the mark? What's the problem with these monkeys? And somebody will say, Arey, nahi ho raha hai, let's go. And say, hoga kaise nahi? It's almost like this ego thing of that this was decided. Why isn't that monkey coming here? So it was really a one-on-one thing with him. And his relationship was wonderful. Like, because me and Shubham had spent a lot of time in those areas with Mahinder, about 2-3 months, trying to crack patterns of movements, trying to time of, because they are patterns, you know. So just try watching those. And again, that Nirman Bhavan area, even monkeys are very sarkari. It's like they stick to routine, and they are they can be worked around.
They're predictable.
Yeah.
So another question is, what advice would you give documentary filmmakers? What are challenges you face? So, well, yes, though there are elements of documentary filmmaking, this is actually a fiction feature. And although the team has made documentary films, this one is really absolutely fiction, other than the monkeys who were their documentaries. So I will. There's another person who's saying they love the film, thrilled to continue to see films like this from India. Big kudos. Is Bigyna here now, or has he disappeared again?
Yeah, hi.
Right. Okay.
Can you
So
hear me?
Bigyna, someone is saying big kudos to the music sound of the film, so original. How do we push such narratives within Indian cinema and create space for them in the audience's mind? We'll come to this set of questions a little at the end. Can you speak about the casting of the films and the fact that you work with both actors and non-actors? Could you speak a little about that?
Yeah. So casting is it's a very interesting process actually. It's a mixture of trained and non-professional actors, and mostly like, so the protagonist of the film, a lot of these people are from the same film school that me and Bigya went to, and even Surabhi was studied many years back. It's a strange mixture. A lot of us were classmates actually, so we've known each other for a long time. So me, Shubham, Bigya, the sister, the brother-in-law, and the contractor are all actually classmates. Not even from one.
Also, I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
I didn't know the brother-in-law is also. Okay.
Classmate, yeah. So, and Anjani, who's playing Anjani, and Kumud, they are classmates of some few batches down the line. So the thing was, there was great familiarity between the people or the crew that were working there, or the central crew. But at the same time, the most critical was kind of Mahinder's casting, because he was the starting point of the whole film, where his whole he was not just a casting choice. He became a script consultant, he became a monkey consultant, a location scout person, and just trying to he helped us see this whole idea of looking at this central Delhi space through a working class gaze, which would not have happened otherwise. That kind of insider view about how the dynamics of contractual labor were playing out in context of this particular job was something which was all coming from Mahinder and the experience of other young men who've been working on this job.
Right.
So once we had cast, it was also of how do you sort of pitch, what is the pitch of the performance? Is it very real? Is it, not so real? Because the film, again, is a pitched up high drama kind of situation. And so a lot of things didn't seem very real while doing it, but we were convinced that we didn't want realistic. We would rather have real than realistic. It wasn't about trying to be something.
Right.
And within that, and also because a lot of scenes were happening in real location with sort of the life going around them, and they had to, like, in the metro and everywhere. So it's very few times they had only one shot at a scene. We weren't in a position to do multiple takes in a lot of situations. So that confidence of the actors having on me and Somo and us having on them, saying that we'll do this, and just trying to preempt what all problems could happen. And a lot of times that meant a lot of rehearsals on previous days. A lot of times while working with Mahinder was actually not to bind him in too much dialogue of our um, uh, yeah. But at the same time, because again the script has to move in a certain direction, so it couldn't be just ad-libbing and you say what you want to say. So it was a very nice experience for me, and personally I really enjoy working with actors since a long time. So for me it's always not the best way of doing a scene, but what are the different ways of doing a scene, and then choosing one which sort of uh, gets a certain kind of unpredictability, a certain kind of uh, unexpectedness, which generally we tend to avoid while doing fiction scenarios. So that was great. And apart from the casting process per se was, again, it was quite a standard process in the sense of the actors, which some actors were, again, we know them, no audition, just we know this they'll do that. But smaller roles like the doctor, um, in the clinic, or the government officers. So a lot of people are real characters who work in NDMC, who work as medical superintendents, who work as veterinarian doctors. So just trying to get them and make them comfortable, and trying to match the pitch between trained actors and non-trained actors was something which we were constantly trying to explore.
Two other people have asked about the title. What is this nonsensical title? Although it's explained right at the beginning of the film, but if you could sort of speak to that a little bit. Were you not worried that people will think it's some strange language film and will not be curious about?
I still have to explain. No, but yeah, we had a different working title. But once we realized that this sound was becoming so integral to the film, integral to the script, and it was just the driving force, and somehow we thought that it seemed the apt title, which seemed to create intrigue but not explain anything, and getting this whole idea of, no, this is a sound, it doesn't mean anything actually. And that there was a fear that samajh nahi aayega or whatever, but I still feel that this was the best possible title for this film, because it really was the starting point of the film, Mahinder sound. And as the film progressed, and how Bigya decided to use that sound in the whole film, in the design, we just thought that nothing else would sort of do justice to this kind of a film.
Right. Ananya Rivana asks, your first film was a non-fiction film and the second one a fiction one. How has working between the two genres informed your practice?
See, again, I've only made one documentary, so I feel very awkward when I'm asked as a documentary filmmaker. I really don't have that kind of experience to say this is that and that is that. But it just a wonderful exploration, like what Bigya was saying, that every day is a new day, and you're trying to devise ways of shooting, of filming people, filming spaces, and again, not trying to impose our uh, you know how do I say, strength or weaknesses on what we are filming, ourselves on the filming process so much. How do we constantly negotiate with all that? So that was something which was wonderful, that really I enjoyed a lot in that Manohar Aich documentary I was doing some years back, and even in this film, that you realize, okay, sometimes we tend to think, okay, just because it's fiction, things have to be done differently, and just because it's documentary, things have to happen differently. So I'm still at this point just trying to explore all that, so I don't have any big insights about both these processes.
I think both the films are really interesting because they don't stick to any singular notion of either genre of what is documentary and what is fiction. Both films are able to bridge a certain differentiation quite interestingly. Another question is, love the female characters in the film. How are they written and conceptualized? And what purpose, if any, did they play in holding the film together for the makers? It's a question that I really like because it was one of the things I thought I might ask you. So thank you for whoever has asked the question.
Like I said right at the beginning, the most wonderful thing about what I was enjoying about the script was Shubham was coming up with situations which were complex and which allowed characters to reveal themselves slowly, rather than take a lens of this character is like that and then hence she will behave like this. You know, as long as we were able to see working women in their different kind of situations vis-a-vis their work or personal spaces, and within that trying to create complex situations is something that I thought this Shubham got it bang on. and that sort of helped us so much in filming, of not trying to be too clever about, let's lens it like that, let's shoot it like that, all those kind of, again, putting baggages on our characters. It remained light, and that sort of helped conceive this idea of, okay, what are these characters? They are, I still resist saying these are strong characters or these are weak characters. They are complex characters, and that is the most critical thing that we always try to do, whether it be a fiction film or non-fiction film. Seeing ki, okay, what are the different shades that can be evoked or explored, or things like that. So the sister's character and the nurse's character, to me, personally became that. And just introducing a character while looking for a black hair clip in the dark, it's almost like a challenge thrown to a director by the writer. Can you shoot this? How do you do this? Because this is, there's no establishing of love. I'm saying they are in love. How do you do that? And I'll give you a scene which has nothing about love, or which has nothing about a scenic locale, or a romantic kind of whatever concerns are there. And but again, the romance was coming through whispers, through the lighting, through one distant police van siren that Big has put, or little kajri which is playing right at the back. So that kind of creation was something I think we could explore, because the writing was so strong in that sense, of saying that you do this and it'll be done, right? A lot of times while doing the scene, we would think that actors were sort of getting concerned that they haven't written the scene properly, so we're going to fill in the gaps. And that was the whole idea of, no, let it be, we'll fill in as film progresses, as the sound design happens, as the grading happens, these gap, there will be no more gaps here. So that is something, again, is rare, and a lot of fun doing it. And I think that is what makes characters also three-dimensional, and not cut out cardboard, conceptual. My problem mostly is these days is a lot of our fictional characters become conceptual because they have to be strong characters. So this was something I think the out and out credit should go to the writing.
Right. So Ramani says, the more I see this film, I'm feeling convinced it's a beautiful love story in our monkey times. My question to Bigyna, please don't go away now. My question to Bigyna is, did he do any dubbing of dialogues? And question to Prateek, how did you manage the contrast between two characters, Mahinder and Anjani? One is completely fictional and the other real. Bigyna, if you can answer the dubbing of dialogues question by Ramani. We can't hear you, Bigyna, but your mic is not muted actually. No, we can't hear you. Oh. Okay, while we wait for Bigyna to join in, Prateek, you want to answer the Mahinder and Anjani question?
Yeah, so two things. One was Mahinder, yes, he was so real, but enough. Mahinder is a really, diminutive guy. He's very short, he's very soft spoken, and he's a very, very sweet person. While as our Anjani he would tower over Mahinder, because just physically he's a bigger person. Shardul is a bigger person than Mahinder. So the most critical thing for us became, how do we sort of flip the status here, of Mahinder being in charge and Anjani being the understudy. So we actually did a lot of things to get this sort of right, because this was critical.
Right.
From the costume to the fact that how Anjani would be speaking to him, what volumes will they be talking to each other, what are the choice of words they will address each other with, so that for me, was one of the most critical sort of decisions, because otherwise the problem is that we are a bunch of middle class people trying to make a film about working class people, and that gaze can become very problematic if
Right.
if not addressed proactively. And that was for me and Shubham, it became a central thing of how do we pitch Anjani and Mahinder together, what will be their relationship, and how do these two characters behave each other and look at each other, you know. So it had to do with costume, it had to do with dialogues, it had to do with the kind of scenes we were giving them, it had to do with who was riding the cycle and who was running behind the cycle, a lot of things. It was a thing which undercut all their scenes together.
Right, right. Bigyna, can we hear you? Can you just try and speak? Are they? No.
Bigya, take off the headphone.
Okay.
हाँ.
Now can you?
देखा, डायरेक्शन वाले ने साउंड वाले को सिखाया. Yeah, the question was, Ramni's question was, did you dub any of the dialogues?
We actually did not. We dubbed only one place in the hospital, the receptionist, just because she was a little too very low, and we had someone who could talk like her. So we dubbed like maybe like a line there, and then a few extra voices in the crowd we must have dubbed.
Okay.
Apart from that, it's 99.9% sync. Nothing was done.
Wow. Shahana says, I felt that Delhi was a character in the film, recalling the monkey man in the city. Yes, that was an image that kept coming back to me as well. And the way the film maps the many Delhis. And on another note, I feel one of those monkeys was surely cast through an audition. Absolutely. Thanks, Shahana, for that comment. But really, the many Delhis is really, I think, what all of you, and particularly Bigyna, has sort of really captured in its essence. Nabina says, your film is about Delhi, a densely populated city, but to me, your camera showed me many blank, empty spaces which spoke a lot. Could you please elaborate about the choice of shots, the wide shots? Also, please talk about the technical difficulties of shooting wide angle in a city like Delhi.
I don't know. I've grown up in Delhi, and I've seen sort of, and as a second generation, immigrant in the city. So for me, this negotiation with with Delhi as a city, as a Bihari person, has always sort of defined how I looked at the city, And we grew up at a time in the 90s where, being a Bihari was a slang in Delhi. So that memory has informed my sensibility a lot. And it was again a dichotomy. I was growing up in a very public elite kind of school, but at home it was a different situation in middle class colonies and things like that. But the whole idea of what is this city, like the wide angle shot. So I feel cinematically we've reduced Delhi to being either an old Delhi city or a Punjabi city or something like that, or an aggressive city, or there's some very strong stereotypes associated with it, and we sort of reiterate them with every film of every image. I feel not just film, even photographs or whatever. So I always wanted to shoot the city as a city of migrants, as and hear the sound of the city as a city of, again, migrants of different dialects, different grains of their voices, and create this audio and oral spectrum which was unfamiliar, where this is Delhi, I know this city, but what you're seeing and what you're hearing is not familiar. And to me, that was very critical of making the familiar unfamiliar. And so that meant shooting like this North Block or even the Basti, we didn't want to shoot the Basti as a, as a gritty place where people are drinking and fighting and there's violence and, the way generally we tend to show in fiction films. We wanted to shoot it as a neighborhood where people live, where there's dignity of life, and there's people want to live in a certain way, and where it's a neighborhood. And those kind of sort of ideas meant that we had to shoot it in a different way, shoot these places as part of, as connected things, even well. And because as we are also constructing a cinematic city here, there's a physical city of a Delhi, but there's also this cinematic city of, central Delhi with nice avenues and central vistas connected with the roads, connected to the then the border of the railway tracks, and beyond the border lies this, ghettos. So those kind of to create that became very, very important and critical for us, because it was of, to me, this film could not be made in any other city. It had to be Delhi, it had to be central Delhi, and it had to be a migrant story, to look at Delhi, of how Delhi has evolved over time. And maybe will can only evolve like this. Um, uh, so so to me, that became a very, very critical stance of how we shoot it. And Somo also, because we didn't want to make it into a gritty film. We wanted to have colors in the film, we wanted to have nice sunlight in the film, we wanted to have a certain kind of warmth and humor in the film, even though what we were talking about were really bleak things. So that was the main idea, I feel.
So we are desperately running out of time, but I'd like to sort of end with, so I'm sorry, Maheep and Farida, I'm going to have to leave your questions, but I'd like to end with uh, Chandra Prabha's question as to what was the idea of bringing the gun, and it acts as a metaphor. It's strange because the gun is handed over to the character of the brother-in-law, but rather than giving him power, it makes him even more oppressed and more powerless. And it becomes this object of fear. So, if you could sort of end this discussion on what was that gun for you in terms of your conceptualization.
For us, it was like an instrument of power, which given to a person who wasn't ready to wield this kind of power. A person or a family which is marginalized, which is disempowered in a very systematic way, and then given a gun of, then to me it also became this kind of, reversal of this puncturing this hyper masculinity associated with weapons in our fiction films, guns and people and Scorsese and, all that kind of thing. I personally feel it's one of the most problematic legacies of not just our films, of films in general, of this whole idea of, and we would all romanticize, oh, Godard said this and Scorsese said that and whatever, but I feel it's just a problematic thing. And how they've fed off each other, cinema and life, and life and cinema, specifically related to guns, and they make it sound so simple and frivolous and lightweight, and somebody, whoever can fire a gun. And so we wanted to have a gun which was big, which seemed heavy and seemed out of place in that small house, and which had the power to destabilize without actually ever being fired. This whole idea of, can we evoke certain kind of potential violence, a violence which could go off sometime, but cinematically without illustrating it, because that would again, where's the critique in that? But again, for me, that gun ka introduction also bears so much weight because of the sound design that Bigya chose to do, since our brother-in-law gets the gun till there, and the choice of that music when he pulls the guns, so I think Bigya can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the choice of music there was more than the choice of music, I think the situation was like that in a way that we really didn't. I don't know if you build it up in such a way that gun has to be like a gun, like that we are used to seeing guns anywhere in our films. Like anybody who's made a film, a gun is always like a gun. Also, like in a society like ours, I feel gun is really big. It's something that can really change somebody's lives. I mean, even just the sight of a gun, like if you can imagine like somebody having a gun just in the house or anything, would just like create a person like how you would see the family, like even if he works as a guard, having a gun in the house would make him something that he would never imagine himself to be. He's not that kind of a person. So yeah, the sound design, the use when specifically when he's coming back, when he's got the gun for the first time, it is something that I would imagine, like maybe like in a very personal level, maybe my parents would imagine something like that in their house. uh, I mean, it's something so drastically, like not it's not in the same plane, same line. It's in a different world altogether. They can never imagine having a gun in their house. I mean, it's the moment of even having like my dad is a teacher. The moment of even having like a small like say somebody coming to your house uh, like with a bribe, like a bottle of milk or something, like to pass their kids would were looked at as such a different way altogether. And gun here is so that was what I was trying to convey there, like for this a guard character. Yes, it is not something that he is comfortable with at all. And the gun there, and then when the gun finally comes out, the didgeridoo, everything creates that sort of a yeah, that's a
Tension. Yeah. Thank you.
tense and everything.
Thank you so much, Bigyna, and really sorry to have lost you in the middle, but Prateek did speak a lot about the sound design, and a lot of people in the comments have also mentioned it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Prateek and Bigyna, for sharing your wonderful film and speaking about it. Apologies to Farida, Mahit, and the anonymous attendee whose question I could not ask. And thank you so much to the audience for being there. A lot of friends, a lot of people known to us. But thank you so much to the Urban Lens Film Festival. Over to you, Bosna.
Sorry, like Surabhi mentioned, because of time we have to cut this very interesting conversation, but we would also like to thank Prateek and Bigyna for letting us screen your film and also for doing this discussion. Thank you, Surabhi. It's always good to have you at Urban Lens. And most importantly, like Surabhi mentioned, thank you so much to the attendees and viewers on Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook. Just to let you know, our next session is on practice session. It's called the Many Films of Northeast India. One of my colleagues have put down the conversation link on the chat. Please do join the on practice session as well. It's at 7 o'clock IST and it's 1:30 p.m. GMT. Hope to see you guys in that session. Thank you.